Hi,
Hi, everybody. Greetings.
we're very happy to be here, and we're really excited to have this opportunity to talk with everybody about motivating language, hand, heart, and spirit. What we're going to do for the bulk of the presentation is we're going to ask you to open up a new tab or pull out your tablet or phone and go to a website called Mentimeter, so that way you can easily see our slides and also participate. Now, just in case anyone has trouble doing that, I'm going to be doing a screen share with you, and we'll be going through the slides through Zoom. You won't be able to participate in some of the exercises, but you should still get the majority of it. So without more ado, let me switch over to the screen share of the slides, and then I'll give you a moment to log into Mentimeter.
And I'm going to give you a code that you can log in with.
Right, and if you see up on your screen, you'll see the website up on the top. That's menti.com, MENTI.com. Once you go to that website, then just enter in the code 57992923. And again, please go to menti.com, MENTI.com, and use the code 57992923. And I see somebody's giving us a heart, whoever that was. I really appreciate that.
Yes, me too.
Lynn, and we'll give just a moment to let everybody have a chance to get over there that wants to go over there. But again, we're really proud to be here. We had a chance to look over some of your backgrounds, and we're really excited to be working with people like you in charge of teams. We tried to craft our presentation at least a little bit towards some of your backgrounds, but as Amra said, we will have a question and answer session at the end. So if you would like to have any specifics about how to apply motivating language to your specific situations, please feel free to ask us. We will try and help out as much as possible.
And we like the hard questions. We learn from them.
Jackie likes the hard questions. She learns from them. I like the easy ones.
No, he's just kidding. And in all seriousness, we also were excited to see who composed the group. For me, it brought back a lot of experiences, because before I was a professor, I worked as a project manager in product development in healthcare. So I see there are a lot of project managers here, and I can relate very much to your experience. Well, we're delighted to be here. We're excited to be here. And today, to put it in one sentence, we're going to talk about how to create a positive communication culture and co-create it with the people that you work with. And we're Jackie and Milton Mayfield. We're going to talk technically about motivating language, or hands, heart, and spirit, and we set some goals for this session. We would like you to come away with a basic understanding of what motivating language, or ML, is. And also, in particular, its value and how it intersects with agility. And we also want you to be aware and understand a little bit about the tools that are available for evaluating and implementing ML. And some of them are on the Comparative Agility website right now, and they're free. And lastly, we would like you to gain some practice with ML concepts. So here we go.
Right, and we also want to be interactive and give you a chance to think through some of these ideas. So to start this out, I want you to take 1 minute and write down 3 words that describe good leader communication to you, what good leader communication means to you. So write down 3 words if you're on the Menti site and put them up there.
And don't edit, just what comes to mind.
Good. Thank you. Okay, and unfortunately, one of the downsides of Menti is it doesn't let the participants see these word clouds when they come in. You can have a link at the end to see all of them, but I'm going to go over the ones that, if you want to, you can look on the screencast and you can see what I'm seeing. But I'm going to go over very briefly some of these and talk about how they relate to motivating language, because what we have on the screen are trust, clear objectives. Another one that's clear, honest, transparency, feedback, clarity, praise, honesty, listening, taking people with you, information, transparency. To be honest, it sounds like you've been reading stuff about motivating language already, because motivating language gives you a way to make workplace objectives clear, to make sure that the people you're leading have a strong understanding of what you expect them, a clear understanding of what you expect them. It also helps you to, as someone said, taking people with you. I think that what you mean by that is that it helps you help your people know why they're doing what they're doing, how what they're doing connects with the organization's overall vision and mission, as well as the individual motives and goal and their personal goals. Also, in addition, and someone said empathy, motivating language helps you build that emotional connection, helps you deal with emotions in the workplace in a way that helps improve outcomes for the organization and the follower. And several of you talked about honesty and listening. Those are things that we talk about because you have to be honest. You have to listen to your follower in order to make motivating language work. So good. I'm glad that, or I hope that this talk on motivating language will help you put these ideas in practice, give you a roadmap to see how to use them. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jackie to talk about motivating language itself.
I'm really impressed because it sounds like most of you are already, or all of you, are already on the journey to grow your motivating language. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to move, hopefully, we're going to advance on that journey. And I'm going to begin by giving a brief overview of what motivating language is. And to sum it up, it gives you a powerful tool to improve stakeholder and organizational well-being. Well, that's a mouthful. So let's break this down a little bit. I'm going to give a little bit of background about motivating language, starting with Jeremiah Sullivan's work in the 1980s. Researchers around the world have been studying motivating language, working with training and development and motivating language for the past 30 years. And we have a quite a impressive database. And suffice it to say, the theory and the way that it's expressed are all based on solid research in management psychology, communication, anthropology, rhetoric, even. And I want to start with does motivating language matter? Why should we use hands, heart, and spirit? Well, let's get down to a few basic things that sometimes just get ignored or it's assumed. Work is communication, and communication is work. We can't get anything done in an organization without communication. They co-create each other. The same is true about culture, and culture is the heart of agility. Communication constructs culture, and culture constructs communication. And the other important thing that we sometimes ignore is the way someone communicates actually motivates and inspires people. And it's tied to a variety of meaningful outcomes, which we'll talk about in a minute. In this particular session, we're going to focus on motivating language for leaders. There's also motivating language for team members, from the very top to many, but we're going to focus here on leadership. And when I say leadership, I'm not talking about somebody with a big desk and a big title. I mean, that might happen, but I'm talking about leaders as anyone who influences in an organization what other people do, and particularly during times of change. Motivating language was developed because oftentimes we assume things about communication and we don't explore its power. We get this vague advice: be open, be transparent. But what does that really mean? And motivating language articulates that and gives a compass that leaders can follow. And this becomes very important because, as those of you, and I know many of you have already been in leadership positions, know, you get interrupted about every 5 or 6 minutes if you're lucky. And priorities change, and you have to deal with a lot of shifting landscape. And as a result, you don't always have the time to reflect. What's the right thing to say, or how should I listen well in this setting? Motivating language gives you that template. And in reality, when we look at leader communication, most of the time, leaders rely on the tried and true stuff they teach in B school, for example, or professional communication classes. And that's not to say that it's not important to spell out what people need to do, but communication's power goes much further than that. It goes into bonding with people, in being inclusive of people, and most importantly, tying all the stakeholders together in sharing the same vision. And motivating language gives that power. To give you a little background, and we'll go over some of the outcomes that motivating language has uncovered in just a minute. Motivating language is also been tested and very rigorously, statistically evaluated and validated in a number of countries, in a number of languages.
Okay, and I'm going to ask y'all to do me a favor. Sorry to interrupt, but we just had a little bit of an internet event. We have problems. We've been having problems with the internet. Just to make sure that people are still connected, could somebody give us a heart? Okay, thank you. Oh, I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And sorry, we had some technical difficulties right before we showed up. We're still having some technical difficulties. If you would not mind, just when we go to a new slide, give us a heart so that we know we're still connected. Sorry, we're down to one computer, and so we can only see the slideshow on our computer. We can't tell if we're actually connected or not. But if you give us hearts, like I said, this is not us trying to beg for hearts, but instead this is us to make sure we're still connected. We apologize for this, but we want y'all to get the most you can out of this talk, and we really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much. And we've benefited from living in the country. We're about ready to move back to the city next month. but unfortunately, our internet services can be sort of flaky sometimes. So let's get back to hands, heart, and spirit, or motivating language, to be more specific, and what type of outcomes does it improve? What does it grow? And these outcomes aren't just for the organization, but they matter. Let's face it, most organizations, even NGOs, not-for-profits, they have to show results in order to maintain their existence. And the other side of this is the people doing that work feel good when they perform well. And motivating language increases performance. It has a substantial impact on retention, keeping that organizational knowledge within the organization itself. And you know well, worldwide, there's been a problem with that. It's not on the screen. We've tested it for engagement in India and the United States, and that's very positive and significant connection. Okay, let's talk about what's good for the work, for people who are doing the work. And job satisfaction has a very robust relationship with motivating language. In fact, I'll use practical statistics here, even though I know most of you know a lot more than that. If you increase your motivating language use by just 10%, you can expect job satisfaction to go up by 5%. That's a 50% increase. Self-efficacy, the feeling of confidence when we perform a task, and by the way, which is very strongly tied to performance itself. Motivating language has a lovely and positive relationship with self-efficacy. Here comes a big one. We just did a study with a colleague on psychological safety and found amazing results about motivating language. And it was in the United States and India. Motivating language has a compelling effect on, and positive one, of course, on psychological safety, the feeling that we can learn and experiment and even make mistakes and learn from them. And relatedly, on creativity and innovation in an organization. I want to add one other that matters, especially for those of you that are currently in leadership positions and you want to gain the trust of your followers. One thing that really sort of blew us away was William Charbrough and others did some research a while back and found out that high leader motivating language has in terms of statistics, it's way up there in strength on how well followers believe the leader is competent and trust the leader. With high motivating language, you can expect a 70% increase in perceived leader competence.
Right, and also I want to emphasize that these results, while mainly have been found out in the US and India, there have been studies and training using motivating language around the world. We've seen similar or the same kinds of results in Japan, Poland, Mexico, Korea, France, Germany, many places in the Middle East. So you can expect to see the same. We expect to see the same kind of results regardless of what country or culture this is embedded in. We do know that you do have to make some changes to motivating language use, but the those are more specifics. For what we're talking about today, it should work very well, apply very well wherever you are.
It's very transferable, especially if you're working in multinational and a global organization.
Yes.
So there are 3 parts to motivating language, and we're going to explore these parts experientially. So I'm just going to give them to you really quickly, and we'll get back into them. There's the hands, and that's direction giving language. There's the heart, and that's empathetic language. And there's the spirit, and that's meaning making language. And they comprise the majority of leader to follower communication. There are few implementation requirements for motivating language if you really want it to work. And they include, you need to use all 3 types for maximum effect. No, not in the same sentence or even in the same conversation. But ultimately, if you want to tap into motivating language's power, you need to call on those 3 dimensions in different appropriate points in time. And secondly, and this is super important, we have to walk the talk. We have to have behavioral integrity. In other words, our actions have to match our words. And we ran some data and found that if a leader doesn't do that, does not walk the talk, sadly, and I hope this has never happened to you and never will, followers can be demotivated. And this is a really important implementation requirement. The leader has to listen with attention and acceptance. When I say attention, I know many of you probably attended effective listening seminars and listening actively, asking the right questions and establishing eye contact if you can, even with Zoom, and summarizing. But there's more to it than that. It's accepting your follower as a person of consequence, no matter what they say. Now, if you have a psycho killer that says they're going to go out and commit a crime, I advise you call the police. But in any other type of situation, you don't have to agree with what your follower has to say, but they need to feel like you're listening with inclusiveness and that you accept them with respect. And lastly, and you'll see this from the scale that's posted on the Comparative Agility website, what really matters with motivating language is it's not your intentions. Follower perceptions have the final way. This isn't a one-way street where you megaphone something. Followers have to perceive what you meant to say, and that's how the scale is constructed. Now that I've said all that and focused on leader communication, let's tell you about some exciting developments that have happened with motivating language recently in particular. And the first one is peer ML. And Dr. Doreen Honke is responsible for the majority of the work in this. And what peer ML or PML refers to is motivating language between team members without the leader being present. And what we found out, and particularly her, and she did tests in the United States as well as in India with large data sets, is that peer motivating language between team members increases performance and job satisfaction. And in more collective cultures, such as the one in India, it even can serve as a substitute for leadership, not denigrating what a leader does, but the team members begin to self-lead, which is an admirable goal. And if you're interested in finding out more about Pure ML and some of the positive results we've seen, shoot me an email and I'll connect you with Dr. Honke at the end of, I'll give my email address at the end of this talk. An expansion of countries tested. Milton already mentioned quite a few of these, and we have Turkey in there and Taiwan. It's not all Anglo countries. Yeah, we have Anglo countries like the United States and Canada and Australia and New Zealand, but we also have more diverse countries in the Mideast, in the Far East. And so we've gotten a lot of consistency there in our results.
Right, and we've also tested across most every industry imaginable, starting out in healthcare, but also in manufacturing, in IT settings.
Yes.
Matter of fact, we've done several very broad-based studies across, like I said, most of the major industrial groups, and the results have been consistent across all of those industries and at all levels of the organization. It seems to work the same whether it's a frontline person who's just started in the job or somebody in the high levels of an organization that has 20 years of experience.
Or if it's a small organization,
right,
or large or medium size. It sounds like we're investigating all the time. Well, we are. That's what we do.
We spent about 30 years investigating this, so we have a lot of data.
So there you go. And we've also found out it can be used in writing, and not just speaking. It can be used with groups, a leader talking to many, not just dyadically, one-on-one. And it works really well virtually, and that becomes very important, especially during the pandemic. We've all had to learn to work virtually. So motivating language has held up really well there.
Okay, good. And now we want to try and get y'all involved a little bit more. We appreciated all the feedback we got at the beginning on what you thought good communication was. Now what we want to do is we want you to have a personal example that you can use to think about the concepts that we have in motivating language. And to do this, we want you to take 3 minutes and write down a description of an important event that happened in your organization, that was communicated in your organization. And it can be about anything you want. Nobody will ever see this. This is not something you're entering into the site, but it should be something that had a strong effect on the workplace. And if you don't feel like writing out a full story, that's fine. Just write down bullet points so it will remind you of it. So like I said, take about 3 minutes. I will give you reminders as time goes on. But the more detailed you can think about stories, the more personal it is, the better I think this exercise is going to work. And if I could have somebody give me a heart, I would appreciate it. Okay, I appreciate that. And like I said, we will come back to this. And
thank you for sharing your stories.
Yes, we appreciate that. Now, what we want to do, we're going to use this story to lead into the 3 types of motivating language. But now what I want you to do, you should see on the Menti screen, you should see again a place where you can write down 3 words like you did with the what leader communication means to you. And what I want you to do is think about the story that you just wrote down. And if you were using that story, if you were telling that story to somebody at work, what could they learn about workplace expectations from the story? So write down 3 words, and like I said, take about a minute to do that.
And just a reminder, everybody's safe. These are all anonymous.
Yes. But think about it as if you were a leader using that story to try and explain something about work expectations. What 3 words or 3 short phrases could you use that somebody could learn about work expectations?
Or if you were a follower.
Right.
Listening to a leader.
Good. Okay, good. We're getting
Okay.
some ideas coming in. Okay, good. Thank you. And you can keep putting them in there if you want, but we have a good number. If you're looking on the screencast, you see things such as integrity, inform early. So if you're using your own stories, what the idea is that from the story that people could learn that they need to inform people early about events, also be timely, another way to say that. Also that it's important to be honest in your work practices, include folks, and have integrity. Every situation is going to be different. Every work situation is going to be different. But what helps you with motivating language, with the hands part of motivating language, is to think about, for a given story, what does the person need to know about what they need to do. And I'm going to switch it back over to Jackie, and Jackie will give more details about the hands.
Thank you, Milton. When we talk about the hands and looking at all our data, we find that most leaders use some degree of the hands. And as Milton said, letting people know what they need to do, all about work that affects them in a timely way. And that is really transparency. And that's a big part of the hands. An overview of the hands or direction giving language is that it clarifies work expectations, because we know when people don't have clear expectations, they lose a lot of time and energy and uncertainty, and it's very stressful. So other parts of the hands, and I saw this in some of your feedback, constructive performance feedback, not destructive, constructive, helping people do a better job and focusing on the job itself and at the right time and in the right place, all that good stuff, and the relevant information, goal setting, setting clear and attainable, achievable, challenging goals, hopefully. Most of you are probably familiar with SMART goals. That goes into the hands. And just as important, rewards. They don't necessarily have to be tangible rewards like more money, although most of us would appreciate that, but they don't have to be. They can be intrinsic rewards, like doing part of a job where you really get to show your talents. But when a leader uses motivating language to express the hands, the leader articulates what the follower needs to do to get those rewards and what those rewards will be.
Right. So again, the main idea behind the hands is this is when you let the followers know this is what you expect them to do.
And it's the nuts and bolts of organizational communication, of leader communication. But there's a lot more beneath this that is not called upon.
Right. So let's move on to the next part of motivating language, the heart. And again, what I'm going to ask y'all to do is think back to the story that you wrote down and think about the emotional impact that event may have had on the people involved. Because it's by thinking about the emotional impact of workplace situations that you can decide how to frame your language, how to use the heart. So take a minute, write down 3 words that describe the emotional impact the story may have had on the people, or the event in the story may have had on the people involved. Oh dear. I'm sorry for whoever went through that event, who just put those up there. I'm sorry for you.
I'm sorry. I hope you learned from it some good things.
Hope things got better.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. We're getting more. Yeah,
I empathize.
Right, a lot of,
case.
right. For those of you that we'll go through them in a minute. But for a lot of, one thing to remember, especially about using heart, is that people remember bad events far stronger and far longer than good events, and so that's a real reason to want to improve your empathetic language.
Right. Don't be the person who did that.
Yes, or help people through the event so they can deal with it better.
Both.
Take about another 10 seconds. I'm adding in a little extra time because I was running at the mouth while people were trying to type. I apologize. I have a bad habit of that. Okay, for those of you who are not looking at the screencast, what we're seeing is a lot of really negative emotions coming out of the events people have written down. The only one that I see that's positive is open up, which is a good, it can be a good piece of advice, but we're seeing anger, upsetment, rejection, stress, demotivation, uncertainty, hopelessness. And like I said, the thing to remember is that negative events have an outsized, a very large effect on people. It's something that they remember and take with them. If you can use empathetic language to help people deal with those events. And we have a story later on sort of pulling together all the motivating language, where you see that sometimes it's from outside events. And I'm going to turn it over to Jackie, and she's going to let you know more details about heart, about empathetic language, and how to use it.
So most leaders don't use the heart very much. That's what our data tell us. And yet in the people that we've tested, that's what they want. And for example, Rita Men, who's a researcher at University of Florida, and her colleagues found out that when leaders used a lot of empathetic language during the pandemic or a time of a lot of change, the trust in the leader grew very, very significantly, and also did performance and job satisfaction and retention. So I don't want to talk around the heart. Empathetic language creates emotional bonds and support. And I'm going to give you some examples. Most of you are familiar with emotional intelligence and the dimension of that, empathy. And some of you wrote praise when you wrote what good leader communication includes. The heart would be giving praise. Countless people express that they don't get genuine praise for real work achievements, not fake pats on the back, but when they really achieve something, recognition and praise. That's motivating language. Good job, Josephine, for finishing that project successfully. But it's not just praise, it's also support when the going gets rough. Because in complex projects, roadblocks happen, and certainly during the pandemic, we've had to encounter setbacks and roadblocks. And during those situations, a leader, instead of blaming the follower, shows a genuine support and helps them find, using direction giving language too, the resources that they might use to resolve that issue. The heart also doesn't just apply to what goes on in the workplace. Very often we're asked to compartmentalize ourselves when we come to work. And that is, in my opinion, wrong. It's You get much more productive, vibrant people when the whole person can come to work. And the heart allows for that. For example, we might come into work with a really positive experience. We ran a marathon. Our oldest child just got a degree from school. We may come into work with a really negative experience. Our dog died. The heart would show compassion for that event. This does not mean that leaders have to go through the emotional labor of being clinical psychologists. That's not that's beyond our boundaries. And on the subject of boundaries, it's okay as a leader to draw boundaries too. You can't have someone in their office breaking down about their personal problems all day. But what you can do that's constructive, and again, it is integrating direction giving language, is you can direct them to resources, for example, employee assistance plans, where they can get the help they need to bring their whole selves back to work.
And moving on to the third part of motivating language, by this time I think you know what we're going to do. I want you to take 1 minute and write down 3 words that describe what someone could learn about your organization's culture from the story. So go ahead and take a minute and write it down. Right, and if you're still typing, go ahead, but I just want to read off some of these. We're seeing the importance of that information is important in the culture, as a culture of openness, improvement, trust, which is good. I'm glad that y'all are in a good organization like that. We also see some cultural aspects that people could learn about lack of involvement, groupthink, and top-down control. So while not all of these are positive, as you'll hear from Jackie's description of the spirit, it is important for you as a leader to let your followers know the good stuff about the culture as well as the negative stuff. If you're in an organization that has more negative than positive, well, the job market is supposed to be good right now, and you may want to think about finding somewhere better. But it is important for you as a leader to let your followers know about the good and the bad in the culture.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because we just finished a study on motivating language and gratitude. And it has a very strong positive relationship with employee gratitude that translates into empowerment and engagement. So what's very important there is that leaders take the time to explain, hey, look, here's some of the benefits you're getting from this job. Okay, when we talk about the spirit, we're talking about the part of language that's used the least by leaders. That's what our data tell us.
Only about half of leaders use it in any way at all.
In any way, shape, or form. And always keep in mind that motivating language is a journey, not a destination. You never are done. It's like life. We're always working to hopefully become better people. Motivating language is like that. But meaning making is used the least. And what the spirit is talking about, and this is really important for agility, is to have everybody feel included on the same page. And when I say everybody, I mean the organization and its stakeholders with a shared vision and speaking the same language, the same priorities, the same aspirations. It also explains the culture itself and it links it with individual follower values. And I might add, I noticed that some of you wrote from the top. Motivating language is contagious in a good way, not like the pandemic. And if a top leader uses it, you can go throughout an organization, and we ran a simulation on this. After about 2 or 3 years, about 70 to 80% of all the leaders in that organization are using high motivating language. So that's something to keep in mind. What are some tangible identifiers for the spirit? Okay, for one, the spirit is really important in explaining cultural values. A lot of times these aren't discussed in the workplace. Every culture has its unique personality. And as you are aware of, there are command performance meetings, right? Where you have to show up or have a really good excuse not to. And you don't want to use up too many chips. A good motivating language leader is going to explain that to followers. And it's also important to recognize the individual contribution of followers to the overall vision. It articulates the overall vision. That falls in the realm of the spirit. I'll give you an example of that. There was a major hospital, and we're not talking about knowledge workers here. We're talking about the maintenance workers, and it's a really cruddy job. And the CEO went to those people and said, "You're not just cleaning up crud. You're making patients feel safe. You're keeping them healthy. You're helping them regain health." And combine that with building in interaction with hospital patients in the maintenance employees' work. Another example of using the spirit is when leaders do job crafting, or they listen to their followers, find out and get to know what their talents are, and adjust their jobs so that person can express what their talent is in the job that they do, and tie it to added value to the organization. The spirit is also very important during times of change, because the vision is going to be modified during times of change, most likely. It's certainly the goals. And also during times of organizational entry, when people are getting used to the culture, and adjustment, again, during change. So meaning-making language explains what those changes are, how the vision has been modified, and how followers are included and important and valued within that vision. And one thing I forgot to add, which you're doing right now, about the spirit, is that the spirit also relies on informal storytelling. Informal storytelling gives structure to cultures, especially informal stories that talk about organizational heroines and heroes, people who go above and beyond to maintain to better organizational values, and to fulfill the organizational vision. So we're going to tie this all together.
Right, and I want to first start out by telling you a story about how motivating language was used extremely well by an organizational CEO. Before I do that, I need to give you a little bit of background on the company. The company's named Cytokinetics, a U.S. company located in California. The company is founded to develop drugs for ALS and heart conditions. It has a little bit of an unusual way of going about this, though. It was founded by MD and a PhD medical researcher, and they realized that a lot of potentially promising drugs were being overlooked because the initial outlay was too high for the large pharmaceutical companies for the expected payoff. But they realized that as long as the company was small, as long as it had relatively low overhead, those upfront expenses would not have the same kind of low return on interest. So their plan is to investigate some of these riskier drugs, riskier in terms of profit payoff, not in terms of health issues, but some of these riskier medicines, develop those up through, I believe it was stage 3 testing. And at that point, they could partner, in interest in partner the larger pharmaceuticals. The larger pharmaceuticals would then underwrite the more expensive later stage trials, as well as partner with them for manufacturing and producing the drugs that prove successful.
And these are often drugs that big pharma doesn't usually cover.
And in building their company, obviously the co-founders were very committed to these drugs. They all had personal experiences with family members or friends that had heart problems, had ALS. And part of the recruiting strategy was to hire folks with a similar kind of commitment. It wasn't all about making money, but rather because people had a personal situation, a personal investment, because they had seen the terrible things that came along with these types of diseases. They were able to develop a very committed, highly skilled set of people in this company. Well, okay, that's the background. And I know it's a little bit of a lengthy background, but it's important that you know what the company was about. What happened was they very quickly, they started working on an ALS drug that held a lot of promise. I believe they worked with some university researchers that had first uncovered the drug treatment. The initial stages, incredibly promising. They moved up to animal trials. In the animal trials, they were doing better than basically any other drug that had been seen out there to date. Everybody at the company was incredibly excited because it on a personal level, it showed them that ALS might be the effects of ALS might be greatly reduced. On a financial level, because that would give them a powerful and incredibly sought after drug in the marketplace. Everybody had stock options in the company. So they started moving up into early human trials, and it just didn't work. As many of you probably know that are in the health industry, a lot of promising drugs at the animal stages, once they're tried on humans, there's no effect. And that's what happened with this drug. They had gotten early overtures from some of the big pharma companies, so it looked like the company was going to be set for the foreseeable future. Once the trials turned out to be negative, the pharmaceuticals, of course, withdrew. That didn't put the company in immediate danger of bankruptcy, but the long-term future was uncertain, and it was up to the CEO to break that news. The CEO came out, and that could have been a devastating story. It could have been one that ended the company right there. But instead, he thought about it. He used motivating language, used all three parts very well. He talked to the people in the company, and he reminded them of why they were in that business, why they had that company, that they were there to take the long shots, to try and be the groundbreakers that would go for the riskier drugs that had the potential for the far greater benefits that the big pharma was not going after. And that that was still their mission. And even though it was a setback, that they were actually being successful because they were moving forward, and they had forged ties with the big companies, and they showed that the big companies that they could be taken seriously. Also, he talked about what they could learn from the setback. That was using the spirit. He used the heart. He just admitted, he said, this is a terrible thing. I understand if you're upset, I'm upset. And we're not going to get over this in a day. We're not even going to get over this in a week, but we will move forward and we will be better. And so he helped them to process these negative emotions. And then he used the hands. He said, here's how we're going to redeploy our resources. He talked about strategically how they were going to move forward and secure more funding. He talked about how the teams that have been working on that specific drugs were going to be redeployed and what they would need to do, and talk about rearrangement of the people in the other parts of the company, what they would need to do. So by using the hands, he let them know what they needed to do instead of drifting. And it worked. It not only worked in terms of finances, because now it's, I think 5 years later, the company is better off financially than it ever was.
Their stock value increased 120% last year, and the retention is very high.
Right. They did not lose anybody for 2 or 3 years after that setback. And I think the first person they lost left because they retired from the company. Morale, while it did take a dip, came back and has remained high to this day. Information sharing and work between teams, all core goals for the team, has continued. Essentially, the CEO was able to take a potentially devastating situation, and by using good motivating language, turned it around to make it something positive, and that people still look back on 5 years later saying, yes, this really drew us together. Okay. And also I want to quickly tell you just about how some people have used motivating language training. We did set up a motivating language training program at Florida Hospital. And we've always used something called the buddy system, which is because one of the more difficult things about training is that you get a lot of good ideas, you get really fired up, but you go back to the workplace and you're not quite sure what to do, or you lose that fire as day-to-day events take place, and you have trouble putting into place what you're doing. So we usually set up a buddy system where we have everybody in the training program switch business cards with somebody else at random, and you become each other's buddies to help each other out. Florida Hospital took this a step further, and what they did is everybody, and we stole this idea. Once they told us about what they did to take it further after we had left, we stole their idea. We always give them credit. We shamelessly stole. And what they did is once a month, they would have a motivating language council, which is kind of a fancy name for essentially getting everybody together in the training session to act as a support group, because it can be difficult when you have setbacks to keep the momentum going. So by having these groups get together, they help keep the momentum going. They also could exchange ideas. I tried this and it worked well. They had a person that was a coordinator who would go back over reminding people about the basic principles. And they also would ask people for help. I'm having trouble doing this. Does anybody have any ideas? And they could exchange ideas. They could say, I was running into the same thing and I've started using this. And the reason we bring this up is to urge you to try, and if you have more than one person in your organization attending this meeting, become each other's buddies. And you may also reach out through the chat room or through other means and try and link up across organizations as well. But with that, I'm going to turn it back to Jackie to give you action steps.
So, thank you, Milton. Those are great stories. And here are some action steps that you can take to successfully implement and grow your motivating language. And the first one is evaluate. Evaluate with your team, in your organization. You can use some of the ML metrics that are posted on the comparative agility site. If those aren't sufficient, again, we'll give you an email address at the end. We freely share our materials.
But it's useful to use the website because they're also building instant feedback and links with many other type of metrics that you can use.
Like psychological safety, for example.
Right. We're always happy to give our skill out to whoever wants it, but then it's up to you to use either pen and paper and collect all the data, and you might do it easier through the website.
Yes, make your life easier. And once you can get a good grasp of what's going on in the situation, develop and train people to grow motivating language in the ways that best add value to your organization and its stakeholders.
Right, and we're always happy to work with training, but also if we're not able to, or you'd like somebody closer to you, there's somebody in France who does France and Germany and areas around that, and there are other trainers with other specialties in motivating language we can put you in contact with if you decide you're looking for outside help.
And be sure to reward and reinforce. And rewards can be selecting someone for an important task because they used motivating language well. It can be a tangible reward, a bonus. And we talked already about some potential ways of reinforcing, and also about the fact the more people in an organization use motivating language, the more contagious it becomes in a really wonderful way. And lastly, we'll put in a suggestion for reading, which is our book, Motivating Language Theory. It's not very expensive. It's available on Amazon throughout the world.
And I'm going to leave this slide up here for just a minute so everybody can get the Jackie's email address. But then I'll switch back over to the main screen so we can have a little bit of the eye contact we were talking about earlier. But if you want to send us, we're happy to answer questions during the live stream. From anybody that's watching this video later on, hello, the future. Nice to see you. You can send questions to jackie.mayfield@gmail.com. That's JACKIE.MAYFIELD@gmail.com.